loud. All right, we're recording.
So my question was, at what point do we make a system and then get user input before designing further?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
At what point were you planning on creating a system based on the simple model and then getting user input and kind of moving from user input? There's the whole kind of lean startup thing where you try to meet people's needs right away and then continue to meet their needs and refine the system that way. I think it's got a lot to speak for itself or whatever.
Yeah, I'm the one who's very much not in favor of that approach. And I know I'm very countercurrent in that. But I've seen, as I said, a long history of these projects of knowledge management failing because they had not considered the complex cases. And in my analysis, others may disagree, but I do think that the complex cases are complex enough that starting from a simple model and then realizing later on, oh my God, there's all these things that are hard to model in our current model, we'll have to restart from scratch, which is what I went through. And I don't want to do that again. And basically stopping the project in its tracks and starting from scratch with the deeper analysis. Basically, I've been through that cycle. I'm seeing everybody go through that cycle. And
okay, I understand.
My
take on it, if I may, is that we are in an information war right now.
Yep.
And the United States is actually at risk of being destroyed.
Yes.
So that seems to be a pretty strong reason to get something in front of people that will help to clarify conversations. So that's.
But a lot of tools exist for that, right?
Okay.
We have debate graph, we have debate map, we have Idealoom, if I may say so.
And the Y source is up and running. Socrates technically is there.
Yeah.
Reason score, Golibot.
Yeah. All these tools exist.
And I guess none of our designs that we're discussing are substantially different from those, except for the complex use cases that Marc-Antoine is talking about. So James, one of the things that I kind of wanted to throw in real quick is just that, as CDL, we're not creating that, but all of us have our own projects, and any one of us or groups of us together are doing that. So like the Y-Source guys, I just told them, here's a website you can go and you can pay quality assurance professionals to use your UI and give you professional feedback. So they're going to look at that. So we are doing that, just not as a part of the group as a whole. We are doing it. Individuals are doing it.
Okay.
But to Marc-Antoine's point, that has been done, and there's a lot of, to some extent. So if you have a new UI piece, then it might be worth doing, but we're kind of in a different space than a regular startup. But I jumped on what you were going to say, and I don't know if we want to give Stephen an idea of what we're talking about.
Yeah, I'm missing context. I didn't get any of this. I'm sorry.
James, why don't you repeat your question?
I was just wondering, at what point do we create a UI and then get people in front of it and see what their needs are before we kind of over assume what, at what point do we do that? And then we get a kind of a feedback loop that we can use.
In the Hangouts chat, I put context. James asks why we're not doing agile.
Or UX basically. I mean, it's one of, I would say that's what I'm doing. My primary focus is not solving it right now. It's the reason I'm prototyping. The reason I started building my specific system is because I don't know the requirements. I mean, I honestly don't believe anyone right now can go out there and implement it with the requirements in place. I know if we implement this, then people will use it. like Kialo, for example. I'm pretty certain Kialo is not the model we're aiming for, but I don't know what model we should be aiming for. So that's why I consider Socrates a prototype for me, even. I just dogfood it constantly to see how can you structure it, what are the effects on the interaction. But that's not what everyone, as Bentley pointed out, is doing here. We all have a different angle on this. My main motivation is to improve user interaction. That's also why I keep hinting at use cases. You might have heard that before. I always ask, what's the use case? What's the use case? But for others, the focus might be maybe a bit different. It could be calculating truth. I have the impression some people are focused more on, or it could be having one canonical representation of an argument. I am less concerned about that, for example. I just want to represent real world argumentation. Bentley and I had a lengthy discussion on Hangouts the other day about that. So yeah, there is some conflict there, but I don't look at it as conflict. It's what makes it interesting to work together. Like, what is the overlap? And I don't think we've pinpointed the overlap necessarily. That's part of the meetings.
And I don't think we've pinpointed the complex use cases yet. We're spending too much time, as far as I'm concerned, in the simple use cases we all agree on, and we're not spending enough time defining the complex use cases. But yeah, as I said, I've seen the simple systems hit a wall, not fail, but hit a wall, and I want to know that I have a path forward for the complex cases that nobody else has tackled.
Yeah, concretely for me, the reason I built what I built was because I wanted to argue relevance. Kialo doesn't support arguing relevance, so I do support that, and Kialo doesn't support negations, so I have negations. So these are what I would call the two novel features in Socrates that I haven't interacted with before. The only reason I have now experienced and ran a user study, was able to run a user study of people interacting with these preliminary features, because there were problems with it, but you don't know what the problems are until indeed you build and you try modeling stuff using it. And I still believe in their value, but they add complexity. Adding complexity decreases
usability.
Yeah, well, learnability, I would call it.
Learnability is more, yes, you're right.
Yeah.
Well, it creates a steeper learning curve,
yes,
basically.
Exactly.
And absolutely. No, this is all valid. I'm at the point where I want to. The problem, I'm working on too many aspects at a time, right? I'm trying to work on a notation for complex statements, but I don't have the storage layer to run my experiments with storing complex statements. So I'm trying to work on that. And on the convergence aspect, the merging aspects, I'm chasing too many rabbits at a time. And I need to focus, but the model of complex sentences and complex argumentation is the ultimate driving force for me. So I want to get that to a certain degree and then say, okay, I understand what I want to model, and then I'll think of the micro underpinnings at the database level, back at the database level. But the notion, for example, when I keep speaking about the separation between causal and epistemological layers, for me, that's a human use case. Being able to say, oh, we want to do X to do Y, and I'm saying no. Is the no about X is not going to give us Y, X is going to have side effects, Y will have side effects. These are three totally different points of argument, and I want to be able to model that efficiently. And why do we know?
I always summarize it as you focus a lot more on modeling logic, whereas I focus a lot more on modeling arguments that are expressed. I don't want to calculate. I have no intent on performing automation of like being able to calculate the conclusion of the arguments being expressed. I'm much more interested in representing the arguments that are expressed. Whereas you focus more on modeling the logic. What does that mean for the conclusion of the arguments that are expressed? I totally ignore that.
Yeah, well, I am interested in the logic and computation, but secondarily, actually. I mean, I've said many times, I want to model the fact that the argument is attacking either the premise, the conclusion, or the link. Even that, it's at the argument modeling level. It's not at the calculation level.
Yeah, that's what I have, right? So that's what I call relevance and negation and
yeah. Yep. And the fact that some of the arguments are meta arguments, like for another one, like thank Felix for bringing us back to similar analogies. I think A will lead to B because A resembles C, C leads to D, D resembles B, and we know C leads to D, so I think we can say A leads to B. Do we? I don't have the notation to express that, to express analogical reasoning. I'm saying X leads to Y because actually X prevents the formation of Y through W. Or the inhibition of Y through W. Prevents the inhibition.
But part of what James is highlighting here is like, have you tried setting up a user interface that allows you to express that, and have you given it to users? And the nice part of prototyping is you can do this on paper. I mean,
I agree totally, but no, and the answer is I haven't, because I'm still working on the data model and notation, which I think is barely understandable to users before experimenting with putting it on screen.
That's the beauty. You don't need the data model. If that's an interaction you envision, James' point here was, have you tried like using that? Have you tried, if this is, you say this is a use case that people want to express X, Y, and Z, like don't make it X, Y, and Z, make it a real use case, a real argument, and imagine an interface, like what would that look like for people to express.
But that's what I mean by building a notation, right? It's building a visual representation of it. I don't have a visual representation at this point.
But that's
so no, I don't know how people
will. The visual representation is the use case.
Exactly. Well, no, that's not true. No, disagree.
Okay, what?
The visual representation is not the use case. The use case
is the one that the use case will operate on. The use case is not going to operate on the data model unless you're talking about maybe a developer that's using a library or whatever.
The use case is operating on the intent, and there's possibly many visual representations of that intent. And so the visual representation is how you try to address the use case.
Yes. And interaction is a user communicating intents to an interactive system. That's Absolutely. What I call a use case. So how do you imagine a user communicating intent to the system you envision?
Right. What I'm saying is I have the use case, but I don't have a system to solve that use case yet, which is different. But I do have the use case. I am perfectly. Analogy is a use case, and the fact that I'm using abstract rather than concrete examples, I don't think is an obstacle. But I think these represent real examples. I mean, I just have
of intent.
And I mean, those examples are all in Willard, right? Like if you look at the argumentation schemes in Willard, you'll find reasoning by analogy, reasoning by, they're all there, and they're all taken from real argumentation.
I agree. Intent. The intent is real. But when I say, let's replace use case with user story, when I say I need more user stories, I'm not asking I need intent. I know that people want to, I mean, intent is I simply want to, in the quickest and easiest way, communicate my arguments. Like intent would be, here's some magic, I'm going to give you this thing, and yeah, the intent is there, but it doesn't say anything about how you do that. The whole question of, to me, argument modeling is how can the user model their intent of communicating their argument in a better way than we have right now in linear text or in asynchronous back and forth, etc.
Agreed totally. But what I'm saying is this: the use case is the question. The system is the answer to the question. And for me, the answer is not part of the question.
Yeah, James, is this all still answering your question? I mean, we can go on, but I want to make sure we address your concern
first. A little off, but that's okay.
Maybe, yeah, I just want to make sure that if you wanted to dive deep on that, if you don't interrupt, these guys will go on it.
Oh, okay,
along with me.
To know, I didn't know that. Along with you.
We have an
that I wanted to bring
amount
up
of debate,
in case it's helpful. So last night I got this message from David. I don't know if any of you know David. He's on a server. He's on the server, Nick Mark's server. He has this project Bridget, which is a browser extension for bridging pieces of information on different web pages, which I think is a really beautiful user interface, right?
Yeah,
idea to be able to tag things. like that, although I don't think it's exactly what we would want, but it's interesting to me.
I think it's
But
part of
anyway,
the solution.
Yeah, part of a solution for sure.
It's being able to do that is essential. And you know,
Yeah.
we have it in Hypothesis, we have it in Bridget, we have it in Memex.
Right.
There-
There's
there-
another one called TagWorks, by the way, from
Yeah,
Nick
that
Adams.
works as well.
I
TagWorks is
haven't
really,
seen
really
TagWorks. I'll have a
solid.
look. But and
But
there
anyway,
was
I got a message from him that he said, we're probably going to do a hackathon for fact-checking apps during the UK elections. Would you be interested? So that has me feeling like I would love to develop something with you guys. I mean, even, you know, my system or another system that we felt like, okay, well, that's in May, I believe. So let's do something for that. Like that feels like something that we might be able to create something meaningful for. Anyway, so that's kind of the thing that has me thinking about practical development of the system that, and then we can find out what the use cases are. Obviously, you know, the arguments for creating a system ahead of knowing the entire specification, but it's just one possible thing that we could do together that would maybe lead to something really awesome and also clarify some questions. So
I went to one of the hackathons sponsored by this organization. I found it extremely disorganized, such
I'm
as
sorry, what was the organization?
the Bridget.
Oh,
It was.
Do you mean Overweb?
Yeah, the Overweb hackathon. You'll remember that Jamie was presenting there, as was Tim.
it wasn't a hackathon, if I'm.
No, it was weird. It was kind of call for proposals using our technology. But
They
the
had a
technology,
hackathon also at the
yeah.
same time. The thrust was the
what,
hackathon.
what could you do
We
with
don't
our
participate.
technology? But they never defined what their technology was. There was no explanation, not even a demo of their technology. What could you do with our technology that doesn't exist or that we won't show you? Or we claim exists. They say, oh yeah, we have it running in this context or that context, but we're not going to show you. But what could you do with it? I was, and I must say, I was like, this sounds like a call for stealing ideas. I was really.
Well, ideas aren't worth much either way. So.
Yeah, they're not worth much. Yeah.
But
anyway, I understand what you're saying, and I think a lot of people noticed that dynamic happening. But nevertheless, he was able to. Actually, he has told me again that he has an SDK that is basically ready this week. So I think it's not a figment of his imagination.
No, I do
that's
think
a Bridget stuff, right? Because Bridget,
yeah, Bridget
that's
exists.
the Overweb. Yeah.
Oh, okay. The Overweb
has that. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's
release.
Probably not a figment of his imagination. I'm just really peeved that he wouldn't show it to us at the.
You're peeved. Yeah.
I'm peeved. I'll say it.
It sounds like an oversell. That's what it is.
It was an oversell. It felt like vaporware. I'm sure there's something behind it, but I'm also sure that he was fishing. He was very much fishing, as in, I don't have a business model yet. Can you please supply me with a business model, without saying what it was? If he had been open about that, I'd have been, yeah, sure.
Yeah,
we can think together about a business model, but there's no notion about how will contributing be rewarded, whether we'll be part of the organization. It was totally, oh, please contribute your stuff.
Yeah.
So besides
where does that leave you in
terms
of this potential to create? Anyway, I don't know if it's like a half-baked hackathon where nothing is going to happen. We're going to be providing everything and nobody else is going to show up.
I think it's an orthogonal.
Anybody wants to do that.
I think it's an orthogonal goal to what CDL is trying to achieve. I mean, it's more like what society libraries are trying to do, trying to have an immediate impact. And I think it needs to be done, like trying to support concrete use cases. And I think a hackathon is a good way to go about that. But I think what we're trying to do at CDL more is not immediately supporting use cases, but more thinking about what broader set of use cases are and trying to create a good foundation. So I'm not certain we can with that goal of CDL in mind, and Timothy can always correct me later if he sees this. I think I represented correctly, but I might be wrong.
Okay, makes
I
sense.
don't-
You know, if I understand you, your goal is to create the world brain that has all arguments in it and they all interlink, and everybody, that's a resource like Wikipedia for debate, basically. So that's
Yeah,
big
yeah. The
goal that-
Wikipedia for debate would be a good way to express it. Like to have an authoritative representation where all the best arguments for any given point reside. That's pretty much the goal here. And of course,
Yeah.
if you can do it for the elections, even better. But you're not going to achieve that goal in a hackathon. So what you can reasonably achieve in a hackathon is maybe a small subset of that. So it might be worthwhile thinking about what can be achieved towards that goal specifically for elections in a hackathon.
Yeah,
And that could be working on concrete use cases and brainstorming how these concrete arguments would be represented in the system. It could be, I don't know.
let's
Thank
get back
you.
to concrete,
I
because
really
you're right.
appreciate everybody's input. Thank you.
James, you're asking a very valid question. We need things now. We need to solve the dismal state of communication and fighting disinformation now. You're not wrong. And you're right to bring us back to this. But what I would like, and something I've been discussing with someone else, is let's have more a kind of Olympiad where people come with whatever their way of representing, doing sense making and representing argumentation are, and then basically we provide a sea of text, and the hackathon is about showing how does your tool model and represent those things, like not come up with the coding solution in that hackathon, but show how does your representation solution help understand this bunch of text. And that, I think, is a perfectly valid hackathon Olympiad
That's a
scope.
super fantastic idea. That is a fantastic idea.
It's not mine. We're working on it with David Bovell. So this might happen actually.
With who?
It could be like the test set, like they have in artificial intelligence research. They have the base set of data. You run your machine learning thing on, and then you have the output. Everyone uses the same base set of data. We could have like a base set of arguments that you need to do sense making on, and then we each present the output or something like that. Indeed.
Yeah.
That could make sense.
And I think that would be super useful, and it's something I'm totally behind as a short run usage.
Who did you say you were doing it with?
David Bovell.
David Bovell.
He's asked me to who should I involve in such a venture, and I'll start giving him names. But I'll give all you all names. Don't worry about it.
But I think we've tried some of that, and maybe Bentley, this is where you can chime in. How do you pronounce that?
Chime.
Hi, Jamie.
Because it might be that we're not aligned on these use cases. Because yesterday I had an interesting discussion with Bentley that the arguments that I want to represent are not necessarily the arguments that Bentley wants to represent in Reason Score. I think you're muted.
We could just start with political disputes in the United States or in the UK, and say, okay, we want to clarify and kill these like in 5 minutes. How do we, these are the top 5 things, or, we can go for something more complicated, but.
I think there's a large overlap in our use cases, but we do have our differences. And I guess that's what highlighted in our voluminous discussion yesterday. And yeah, but to that point, I think there are several things that we could pieces in the hackathon. Like one is provide a subset of data and have people play with visualizations of that data in ways that's easy to understand. And then have a collection and where people are trying to collect data and put it in a system. So people doing internet research. And then also on Marc-Antoine, on that idea about the Olympiad, I'm not sure. I kind of want to bring up, we were both in that other meeting, but I didn't speak. One of the things that I still want to do with Gullybot is, or with the Reason Score scoring system, is that there's a debate mode where it keeps score. You have 2 scores and people are battling over. It's very confrontational. although you could turn the scores to be a collaborative process where you get points for adding valuable information regardless of what side. So you could do it either way. One's more viral, one's more positive. So that's something I kind of want to throw out that I don't think anyone's going to really want to do. But I would love to have a debate competition where you have two teams of like 3 people. You have a barker who's calling out what they're putting in the system, and 2 other people that are actively searching the internet for evidence, right? Instead of having 2 people through memory trying to have a debate, or 4 people through memory have a debate.
There's more roles than that. There's criticism, there's, finding counter evidence, finding new ideas, filtering ideas.
Yeah.
There's all these roles. It's a guild, right?
Yeah. But yeah,
that was Jack's idea originally, to have these guilds. When he says World of Warcraft, that's what he means, having these guilds with specialized skills battling it out on a quest. And getting but the quest is creating this common knowledge map, this common sense making. That means each guild scores points for contributing substantially to the common knowledge map. So that way it's really a competitive dynamic.
Right. And yeah, so my idea is just that in a game show format where you're recording everything. What I don't know is whether the action happens fast enough. If you have 2 teams of 5 people, I think the action will happen fast enough that you could watch it real time. But yeah, anyway, so I've been wanting to do a new version of a debate show that uses some of our scoring methods, and rather than just where you stand up and talk for 5 minutes, and then an audience vote at the beginning and end if you're doing it really well, like IQ squared. But have an evidence base.
It sounds similar to, I mean, the closest that I can think right now of tooling support that exists and that's used in practice, it's like design support tools, because it's very similar. It's partially argumentation, but you need to choose between different alternatives, like the entire tool set that derived from IBIS, if you've ever heard of IBIS. That's the original tool that introduced it. And now there's actually vendors that sell this to the companies, like, hey, do you want to improve your design workflow? And they do that. They sit together with like teams. You have a person inputting it in the system, and you have a real-time score that says like these are the different options.
You heard me quote Steve Easterbrook saying he did this category theory model of model merging, and his first application was a formalized design conversations. Like it was basically design models, graphical design models. And
but do you believe, Bentley, that there is a tool out there right now? Well, I would say it's probably Kialo, but is there a tool out there right now that's powerful enough to host such a discussion? Because I know Socrates can do it. I know.
Well, Socrates doesn't have the automatic scoring system, right?
Yeah, exactly. I don't even want to. So and Kialo doesn't either, by the way.
Right. So, but Reason Score does. But that's
but like then one of the reasons, for example, why I couldn't do it on yesterday, I tried to add something to Ysar is instantly I wanted to add relevance, and I couldn't.
Well, Reason Score does have relevance.
Okay. No, you can score relevance. Can you add arguments for relevance?
Yeah, and then the debate whether the relevance is true or not. So maybe you and I should sit down and see what it fits. There are definitely edge cases that Reason Score's mathematical model is very naive. So it doesn't have the ands and ors and stuff like that. So there are definitely edge cases where you get in and like, well, I add this in and it puts way more weight than I really wanted to in that position. But I think the 80-20 rule, I just don't know if it's there. That's why I'd like to get 6 people and do a beta test and show it online and stuff like that, of doing a live debate with it. But
I mean, yeah, that would be super useful. And I don't care which system it is, just the mere fact of going through that experience would be super useful. The question is more like, depending on the goal, yeah, if you need scoring, you need to, of course, pick a system that has scoring built in. But then the question is, what do you want to score and how do you intend to influence the debate?
Yeah, well, we can try it with the Reason Score and if it breaks.
I think that reason scoring for me is kind of internal to the tool. And it's part of what, like, I would like a meta score that helps to judge the scoring system. So that way I would tend to have a scoring system
Isn't
that
that
is
humans?
what?
Aren't we the meta system that evaluates the scores?
We're the meta system. Yeah. But the question is, what are judges going to judge, right? It's the ability of the teams to really to have a comprehensive understanding of the situation, to come up with new understandings based on that comprehensive understanding, how much they grew from one another's experience to get cooperative. And that is not the basic scoring of, is this a good idea or bad? It's about more was there a constructive dynamic of building new knowledge. For me, this is what I'd like the human judges to think about scoring, and whether there are in-system scores that help people towards those higher level goals is something I'd like to be able to judge.
Well, it depends on the purpose, right? Because we already have a debate system where people get judged on the quality of manipulating other people. But that's what it is right now. You get judged, you don't care what side of the debate. The reason scoring system in the end, this is a different debate than that, right? That's learning how to debate. This is who's right.
And this is why, well, I don't know. It's very interesting here. The ability to manipulate is one thing, but ability to manipulate is done through very much through disinformation. And in a system, and from making sure that some people live in a bubble and don't have access to the opposite point of view. Now, in such a system, everybody would have access to all the information. So hopefully some kinds of disinformation would be harder to play. At least in the context of the game. Now, the other thing is I kept speaking about coming up with new ideas that were not there at the start. Now, of course, it's hard to prevent somebody from, hiding an idea and coming and playing it later, so to speak. But I think that being able to build on one another is a very separate scoring feature than, and I think if we make polarization into a negative result, we get
all of these are possible, right? But I think that we started out like, what can we do now? And yes, certainly these are interesting things to think about, but we're not going to have that by May. So I wholeheartedly applaud the idea of just simply applying something like reason score to a real world debate. And I would reframe it, but I wouldn't say because it gives an objective score. The point here is you're evaluating the system to see whether or not it gives an objective score. It's simply you're trying out the system to see whether it works, and then you can get qualitative feedback. Do people agree with the score that comes out? Like, which arguments do they struggle? You're doing a usability study, basically. And
but the question is, what is the subjective score aiming at? And this is what I'm trying to say is worth thinking about.
Yeah, well, truth, right? That's what
I think we can tap into a group to, there's a group called Intentional Insights that does the Pro-Truth Pledge, and they have a lot of members. And I will bet you that they would be happy to do usability studies on multiple systems.
I'm an admin in that group.
You're an admin in that group. Okay.
I can put it in there. I'm actually a co-founder.
Yeah. You're a co-founder of that group. Yeah. Okay.
But I've just been focused in other areas. But yeah, that's a good resource. I guess, Stephen, to your point, you're saying, well, the idea is to test the system. Well, I don't think the participants and the viewers give a damn about that. So there's lots of people that would get different things out of it. That's why we would do it. But why would participants participate? Well, because they want to see, people petting each other.
Yeah, but you can't give empty promises like, well, this works because it calculates the truth. If you have never tested whether or not it calculates the truth, right?
Well, yeah, but you can have people can know it's beta and it's an attempt, and someone might find a way to hack the system, and that's part of the story.
I'll tell you more. Somebody will find a way. That's why you're doing these studies, to discover shortcomings.
I know how to manipulate the system.
There you go.
I haven't figured out how to prevent it, but
This
if
kind
it,
of thing
it,
would
I
really
think
meet my
it
needs.
might be entertaining to you.
James?
Entertaining, might be entertaining. It would meet my needs to move a UI forward, and to possibly create some clarity, create a system that is practical in the short term to, you know,
But
create some sanity.
what is not enough by Kialo right now? Because again, for me, Kialo is the current best system
Kialo.
out there, right?
Well, I should look at it again, but basically I looked at it a while ago, and one problem that I saw some criticism about online, and I also felt was really a total disaster, is that people could edit other people's nodes. And I thought that is never going to actually be helpful,
Yeah.
because anybody can go in and just destroy.
That's a core philosophy of the canonical debate.
That anybody
Yeah,
can
we
go
can.
in and edit.
Yeah, because no one owns the land. So that's an interesting discussion we should probably have.
Boy, yeah, it is super interesting, because
I think it's essential.
it's
To be
essential
able
that
to-
everybody
Yeah.
gets, not everybody, but people get to change other people's opinion, like input.
Well, there is no other people. You know what I'm saying? It's no one. We're saying no one owns it. Now, there's an interesting layer here with Jamie's Society Library, because she takes in the actual quotes from media, and then she says, this is what we think they're meaning. And so we're saying we should be able to change, this is what I think they're meaning. And the CDL doesn't actually store the quotes, but Society Library will. So I think what you want is something like, here's my meaning, and then here's the what the commons kind of interpretation of all of that.
Yeah, I hear the big conflict between collaborative versus private argument mining, because Jamie will come in and say, no, we have the best argument mapping tool, which is debate map. And I don't disagree that it suits a private argument mapping tools better than Kialo has. It has more features than Kialo has. The problem is the collaborative aspect. And then indeed, it's like, who can edit claims? What happens to edited claims? Do claims represent one viewpoint? Are claims reusable, etc.? So
They are reusable.
yeah, but
Claims
it's a
are
private
usable.
system. It's a private
No,
system.
People can collaborate on maps. We've just have the settings of our own map set so that people own the individual nodes that they're working on, and only approved people can work on those maps. But there are different versions of debate map where it's completely
True.
open.
But just
And you get your
imagine
relevance distinction.
Google Docs
Ooh.
is collaborative and everyone can access it. I'm telling you, if you give everyone access to one debate map, like the same as Kialo, you give 100 people access to a debate map, it's going to go wrong.
Basically,
Fundamentally.
Jamie, the question.
I don't think there's any evidence to support your claim.
There is plenty.
There is 5
There's
decades of
internet.
CSCW research to back that claim. That's why collaborative systems are not the same as private systems.
Yeah,
Well, I would argue that it's irrelevant because it's the experience that you've had have not been on systems like debate map.
no, because sorry,
Marcus,
Jamie, I'm sorry. It's you're not looking at adversarial edits. It's not a case for you. It is a
Right.
real case in real life. It's
real life as in an open system, and that's one of
Yes.
the reasons why we're curators, is because we don't have to deal with that problem.
Exactly. But what I'm saying is the moment you want to not have, I'm sorry, but curators can be accused of being of having bias, and to avoid that, you have to be more inclusive. And if you don't care about accusation of bias, fine. But if you care about accusation of bias, you have to be more inclusive, and then you get into the problem of how do you deal with adversarial edits. It's
no. So let me quickly say, Marc-Antoine, that I mean, absolutely, curators can be accused of bias. And so that's why one of our long-term goals is to create a distributed content analysis system, so that there's intercoder reliability in terms of how that data is processed. And that's borrowing that from the social sciences that have to perform content analysis in a rigorous and objective way. So the long-term goal is the creation actually of the internet government, because the internet government is a dual intercoding full system, which with each and every single micro task also being performed redundantly, in a content analysis distributed system. However, in order to create a distributed system where the system itself allocates those tasks redundantly and distributed anonymously among users that are working in different tiers, and then the whole system can be intercoded by another system, which is meant to be the difference between the Society Library and the Internet Government, is that the Society Library will have trained internal curators and the Internet Government is meant to be open. But in order to get to that point and having that content analysis process, we need to have a end-to-end micro task a system hard coded in that content analysis process. And that's what we're doing the learning on now. We're learning, okay, from the ingestion of data down to mapping it in a map, what are all the little tasks that have to be performed? And right now we're just working on doing that manually and then working on doing that efficiently so that eventually it's hard coded and distributed content analysis system. Because we can't create that system
debate
unless we
map
know every
doesn't do
single
that,
step.
right? Everything you described now, I agree with, but debate map
No,
doesn't support that.
Right. It's the
That's my
curation
point.
process that it's the curation process that we currently do up until that point. So that's a new system that we have to build. A friend of mine who's now getting into these different groups has.
But so we agree,
built
right?
A modernized version.
The system doesn't exist.
The system that I think there's a separate debate between us about whether this microtask system can be free from accusations of bias, but basically we agree that collaborative in adversarial or multi-party, irreconcilable viewpoint circumstance needs precisely mechanisms to both allow and control mutual edits. I mean, we need to both be able to say, this is how I view this opposing viewpoint. It needs to be incorporated and not rejected, but it also needs to not overwhelm the original. This is how I view my original viewpoint. Thank you very much, right? Both interpretations of the viewpoint, both the straw man and the steel man need to coexist. And that means a view of collaboration that is resistant to adversarial edits. And that's what I mean by collaborative.
Well, yeah, but you don't have to have a system to have collaboration. It can be done manually.
Yeah,
so just as long
guidelines.
it doesn't matter whether they can contribute data. The point is it transparent, and can they find their complaints well worded or better worded in the system? Doesn't matter how it got there.
No, the hard disagree. You need a system, if only a human system, to settle dispute.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. It could
that's
be
a
done
system.
manually. It's a
That's
human
a
system.
Yeah.
And
it is being done manually.
You don't need software that can handle that.
No, and this is, I'm not done. And this is also where, if you have people who are really adversarial and willing and able to destroy other people's data, and that's up to the software system whether data can be destroyed. If data
only if they have
can be
access
destroyed,
to the data. Yeah. If they have no access to the data,
that's a software.
Like no access to enter it at all.
That's a software system.
You can communicate over Twitter.
That's exactly a software system saying that you don't have access, and then accusation of bias. The question is,
well, right, but the accusation of bias they don't have to have access to the system to defend against an accusation of bias. That's not an absolute. There are ways to defend against just as effectively. If they look in there and see the data that they would have put in there is in there, they don't have to have access to enter it. There are workarounds where we don't have to have a collaborative system in order to bypass accusation in the short term. It's just very manual and very painful.
Quite.
Yeah. So manually, it's definitely possible, and I think Jamie's proving it's possible and highly useful. But my general point is simply, how do we automate it?
And that's why I'm looking at federation as a major feature of the system. Collaboration through data federation.
So if I can, back to the idea of brainstorming. So we talked about like having the debate in the system, which I like, but also did anyone resonate with the idea of just having some data out there and having a hackathon to people to do visualizations for it, or is that not of value?
It's totally of value.
Big value.
Well,
no, let's
choose any. We could even use Giallo.
No, I think the idea is to have the data as text and the hackathon be about how would you model it visually and data? And that's what the hackathon is. Of course, I would like for collaborative data format to be the basis of the visualization hackathon. But I mean, we're still hammering that one out. Though I do feel we're converging, believe it or not, albeit very slowly.
I think having a tree of claims like out of a Kilo system and then figuring out how to analyze them. But then I don't know that there's much use in visualization if you don't have some sort of scoring system, even either Wysaurus or Kialo's voting, though they do both have voting systems. In that case, I'd actually probably suggest Wysaurus or Reason Score as the, because when you're doing, you know, visualizations, it's good to have some sort of number to.
I think the hackathon must be in visualization techniques because, for example, you say, my issue with all visualization technique, not all, sorry, quite a few of them, is they're very much tree-based. And this is not a tree, this is a graph and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And
I have a tree, but it is a graph. I just represent only a tree at a time, but it is a graph. Just
fair enough. No,
yeah,
and
so
that,
I mean,
I said, that's why
yeah.
I corrected myself and said most.
Yeah, I have some visualization ideas that aren't that, well, it doesn't even show a graph though. It's
but
just
Kialo,
showing.
But Kialo is intrinsically a tree, and that's one of my main problems.
They open it up ever since they have claim reuse, but then there's a lot of misuse of claim reuse because they not inherently have claim reuse in mind, and it causes all the problems you would expect if you start out with modeling a tree, right?
And that comes back to your original question, James, is why don't we just iterate? It's because iteration creates technical debt. If you start with the wrong model.
That's true.
So I don't know that and we don't have to discuss it now, but I don't know if that's saying that you have to have a graph instead of a tree for visualizations is necessary.
I'm not saying it has to be visualized as a graph, but I'm saying the data model has to be a graph.
That depends what you want to visualize, of course. If you're only interested in visualizing one argument, you can perfectly visualize it as a tree, and then you can imagine.
Because I don't know if there is a way to visualize more than one argument because the human brain can't conceive of that.
More than one argument?
At a time in one visualization without some sort of navigation. I don't think humans,
because I mean,
I'm not saying that I'm not claiming that that's true. That's my intuition is I don't think
IBIS showed that that visualizations precisely help people keep more than one argument in mind at a time. I mean,
one different way of viewing the same argument, not two semi-related arguments, right? I mean, I haven't looked at the IBIS system, but I would doubt they got that far.
The IBIS didn't get into visualizing the inside of the argument structure at all, and that's why I'm trying to go further. But the original IBIS is saying, you know, here's an issue, here's a different proposal, and this argument is pro this proposal, con this other. But there's no comparison between arguments, but it did allow people to think about weighing those arguments once against the other. So considering more than one argument at a time when weighing options. It did allow that.
But it's a tree, it's not a graph. It is a graph.
No, it's a graph. In Compendium, it was a graph. You could have an argument pro one position and against another.
I read the companion paper, but it's ages ago. I mean, I'll have to check that again.
I remember. I've used it. It allows both.
I haven't seen a visualization. I mean, someone may have understood it. I haven't seen a visualization that the average person could consume it in a reasonable amount of time.
No, it's not that there's courses on using these types of systems in companies because usability and learnability are two different things. There are also studies that show once people start using it, they do have more effective decision making. So yeah, you need to learn the system. It doesn't work out of the box. Any complicated domain you need to learn before it's like you need to learn about argumentation first, of course, before you start using the argumentation system, or the argumentation system teaches you argumentation as you start using it. But you can't expect out of the box that the system is so intuitive that you know how to argue effectively.
Well, there is no absolute like that, but it is a range on how learnable, how intuitive a system is.
Yes.
No,
And I have a feeling that there's a lot of room for us to
Yeah.
make things more
Oh, yeah.
intuitive. And that's what
No,
I
no.
would like to work on.
no problem there. But the IBIS study is interesting because they did use it a lot, and there's a lot of real learning that came out of it. And what they did that did work was get people to do the mapping in real time during town halls. Like they had these in-presence meeting, a lot of people arguing it out verbally, and a secretary making it into IBIS representation in real time. And that helped people think. It helped people anchor their arguments. And oh, by the way, we dropped that. Oh, by the way, we still don't have an answer to that one. And so it was consumed by everybody very intuitively. But when they tried to make it, oh, everybody add argument asynchronously and enrich the thing, it was a mess. So there's a skill to inputting, which is very distinct from the skill of consuming, which was intuitive, but the skill of inputting had to be specialized. And this goes for Jamie's argument about curators, and there I agree with her. But it did work as a consumable format. It was intuitive enough. And the asynchronous didn't work because then we got into more editors. But as a support for real life debate, it was a roaring success. My problem with that is it doesn't scale because it's still in person. And how
I even
can we
heard
make
some
it?
of these systems being used in what is it called in Germany, where they have more citizen involvement, liquid democracy.
That's a Zubizarreta study with dynamic facilitation in the town halls. Very interesting study. They're not using IBIS, they're using another system. But
yeah.
So I think that would be an interesting hackathon.
Yeah.
To let UI
definitely.
people kind of give them some data and let them go to town with it.
But the question is, what is the data? And I would indeed be more open and go towards the text format, because indeed, if we adopt Kialo, I mean, for example, if I were to participate, I want to model relevance, and Kialo doesn't model relevance.
When you say text, I don't know what you mean. Do you mean
just an article, just argumentative writing?
And so they have to break it up into claims as part of the process?
Yeah.
I don't have time to do that and create a visualization in one hackathon.
No, you don't have time to code the visualization, but the idea is come with your visualization software and do the claim extraction and create the visualization in a long enough hackathon. Can be done.
I mean, my goal was to experiment with new visualizations, not to demonstrate the existing visualizations. So that could be two different things. But yeah, I mean, you could draw it out. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, you could do Photoshop, right? You don't need to have a coded system. I would code because it'd be faster, but I think it'd be easier if they were already broken down into complaints rather than this crap that people tend to use when they write down an article.
But do you see the problem that then the data format dictates the visualization?
Yeah.
Actually, well,
let's and that's why I said at some point in the other conversation, sorry, I'm repeating a lot of stuff between conversation, make it a kind of pentathlon, right? So day one, everybody does claim extraction. Day two, everybody does visualization. Day three, everybody does, how can I build on the results of that visualization to come up with new ideas? And day four, let's make it a staged process. So everybody has access to what everybody else has done but on the previous day. So if you've done claim extraction and I've done claim extraction, we all have access to all those claims for the next step of visualization and so on.
I think that's an interesting idea. Are you requiring people to participate in all sections if they don't feel? I know some people that would never be able, that are great visualizers, but would never be able to break down or debate.
I think I would like to have teams participating. Like this is what pentathlon teams do, right? They have people who are better at one aspect than another.
That sounds exhausting to host.
I'm not saying it's a small effort, but I'm saying it's a valuable effort.
Yes, I just wonder if there's, I mean, even with today, and a lot of the times you bunch these things together because people are flying to a central place to do it. Now that we're doing most everything online, having a weekend where you do one and a weekend where you do the other might be another possibility.
Yeah, I'm all for it. And I agree in the sense that when I say get a team together, it does mean that some people will not participate in certain days if that's not their interest. And that's fine.
Yeah.
And you
That's-
just have
that's
to make sure that input is provided, of course, if you jump in midway through. And that could indeed be the output of some of the other teams, maybe.
Make all the outputs open, and that way
Mm.
everybody can build on everybody else's, which is really what I think is the whole point of the.
And if Jamie participates, then we also have a debate graph output we can start from.
Yeah, sorry, I had to answer a phone call.
Not
in the
debate
middle of
graph,
it.
sorry, debate map.
Debate map. I had to answer a phone call in the middle of the conversation. So you guys are talking about a hackathon now?
Well, we're
Well, I don't-
talking about the Olympiads.
Oh,
Yeah,
what is this?
it's kind of debate Olympiad's wrong. An epistemic Olympiad, I think, is what
There you go.
David was saying.
Yeah,
Or I don't know if Marc-Antoine, is that was your
yeah. It's totally what I'm talking about.
I mean, I think a lot of people don't know what the word epistemic means, but yeah, sure. But that's a perfect name if you know what it means.
I think
But I like that.
So what's the goal? What makes someone a champion? The biggest map or the most reasonable reason?
Well, I mean, in that way, it'd also be closer to a hackathon that I don't think we would. Or are you thinking of awarding winners,
No,
Marc-Antoine, or just to have the event?
I would, and that's part of the conversation we were having earlier. What are the criteria of success?
Winning.
And for me, the criteria of success is the general contribution. And if we have it staged, sorry, Jamie, you missed that part where I said, a pentathlon, one day or one weekend Bentley proposed for extracting claims, and one day for building visualizations on it, and one day for making new ideas out of the visualizations, like using the visualizations to come up with new ideas. The idea of, for me, what I'd like to reward, and each of those could have separate goals and separate scoring, finding the implicit presuppositions, contributing implicit presuppositions that are accepted by the community would be a good score for the first part, for example. For me, the ultimate score is being able to come up with ideas that build on what others are doing, like to get the real collective intelligence out of it. And there would be a kind of global score for more decreased polarization at the end of the process, right? And maybe we could do a kind of change my mind. What are the ideas that help me depolarize? So you could point, this is what somebody else did that helped me depolarize.
So assessed by a panel of judges or something along those lines, or
no, that's scoring. That's not judge.
Oh, you want to
Survey.
actually implement scoring mechanisms, like X number of people have changed their minds or something like that? Because that's a lot of work, right?
It is. The participants say, this is the team whose work has helped me change my mind. So everybody scores the other teams, and that's a good, it's not that hard.
Okay,
It's a little
so
survey,
peer review survey. Yeah, that makes sense. It makes sense to assess multiple dimensions. Otherwise, it's very biased towards,
yes.
And it breaks, what do you call it?
One quick idea is,
different ideas, yeah.
a lot of the systems like that, they say you're not allowed to use existing software or existing projects, which we wouldn't say, but
No.
I'd want to kind of measure the delta during the hackathon rather than, oh, well, I don't know, maybe you could have different scores.
I want a space for someone like Jerry who masters an existing tool.
Right.
And see what he can come up with, because that's a skill.
Yeah, and maybe we could just have a separate judge for greatest advancement during that could be one of the prizes.
Yeah. But I don't think of it as an hackathon. I don't think of it as a moment where people are coding new stuff. For me, it's about, we've all been working on this for months. What do our existing tools or new tools or emerging tools add to the conversation?
So yeah, being at a decathlon or a pentathlon, that gives the right thing, because they've been training their whole life for that, right? So a lot of people, so that gives the right impression. Interesting.
Well, so time out. What's the point of organizing this again?
The point is to getting people understand the value of what we're doing, I think, the value of debate map visualizations, and to see how well do debate maps or what we're doing, how well does it help the actual debate and collective sense making and collective intelligence.
And it's kind of a QC process for our tools. But Jamie,
Yeah,
also a lot of this comes out of discussions in the Open Global Mind group that Mark Antoine's been working with, and I've been in a few where they're talking about creating an event. Anyways,
No, this is
this
the
is
David
where it spurred
conversation, right?
from. Yeah, I'm just saying this, yeah, it kind of spurred from that. I don't know if we're thinking about combining it. That one's specifically climate change oriented, when this one may
I
not
see
be,
one
or
problem
maybe.
though, because we are talking about collaborative systems, and where's the collaboration part in this? If each team or group will do that individual, I mean, how are you as a participating in this hackathon or whatever you want to call it? How are you going to do the collaborative things?
I don't put the collaboration at the core of the hackathon, except somebody who has a collaborative system would be advantaged because they can get a bigger team.
Oh, so the collaboration would be within the team. Then if you want to represent some collaborative features, you would, as a team, represent collaboration. Okay, yeah, that could work.
Yeah, or at least
Or
the collaboration just is not one of the things that we're really testing in this, just because I
That's another
don't
option.
see how, yeah, but yeah.
Or it could be one form of the hackathon when if one of the stages is being able to integrate
Gather.
output from other tools and teams, that becomes one of the competitions in the pentathlon.
It'd just be really hard to do in a short period of time.
Yep. But that's why I liked your idea of having it on separate, each phase of the pentathlon being separate weekends, because then we have the week to
code and stuff. Yeah.
Between each phase. I like that.
Well, I would definitely attempt, definitely given the latest stuff that I've been doing with annotating plain text and stuff like that, it would be awesome.
I agree.
Whoa, wait, tell us more. You've been annotating plain text?
That's, yeah, I mean, you have the demo on the, I started writing my academic farewell letter, and I'm doing that in like annotated Socrates statements. It just, each claim links to Socrates basically, where then you can see the formalized arguments. But you have the tiny example on my front page. It's been there for over a year. I just now created a JavaScript library so you can import it to external websites. So I now have a GitHub hosted web page that simply imports statements from the Socrates backend basically. It's nothing big, but it's nothing big, but it seems big to a lot of people because it represents a concrete use case, as opposed to this abstract tree that nobody understands and you need to read the tutorial for to know what's going on. But yeah, so my goal there is to actually open up the system more to other people, that they will, rather than commenting at the bottom of the blog post, I want them to comment on Socrates or just by adding arguments. That's the current idea. But I'm not far away from there, so I would definitely, if I join that hackathon, Bentley, if you think I'm doing that, I will join with that.
Can I say your homepage doesn't Google well?
You mean Socrates isn't Googleable?
No, I just put your name because you said your homepage.
No, just the homepage of Socrates.
Okay, got it.
And James, I don't remember the name of that QA thing. I mean to look it up for the Ysource guy, so if I find it, but I think if you Google around, you'll probably find a few. I don't have one that I have actually used, so I can't recommend a specific one, but they definitely exist. So if you want someone to test out your system, that's an expensive way to get it done well. I've been thinking about using it, but I know the problems with reason score, so I don't need anyone to tell me. It is crap. I don't. Up, Stephen, you're muted. You seem to be enjoying what you're saying.
I said, don't call it crap. It's a prototype, is what it is. Don't call it crap.
Yes, it is an alpha. Although I have hired a social media team to promote it, so we'll see what happens.
Woo. We're all like an alpha.
Yeah.
I wish I were.
Yeah. Very long running alpha.
No, I mean I had a product and decided to scrap it. It wasn't good enough. That's different.
Well, I've rewritten reason score 6 times in different languages almost every time, or at least different frameworks. And I'm about to change it to Svelte just because, you know, why not? It'd make for a much smaller plugin.
You're in Svelte, you say?
I'm thinking about putting it in Svelte because that'd be much smaller than React.
Yep.
Because it's meant to be something that you could just post on your blog or any website. It's a plugin to another system. So the smaller the better. But
Yep.
since no one's using it, that's really pre-optimization. But
Right.
it'd be a good tool to learn Svelte because I like the idea.
Yeah, I'm very much looking at having some of these visualization tools be expressed as web components. I think Svelte compiles to web components, but I'm not sure. I've been looking a bit at AppRun because I know it compiles to web components in a sensible way.
AppRun?
Yeah, it's a smaller, but I'm not fixed on any one framework yet for front end. It's the search for the perfect framework that compiles to web components, because for me that's a requirement. React is a bit too opinionated, but I want composable components, right?
Yeah.
And yes, Svelte is high on my candidate.
Well, I like that so much is done in the compile step.
That is beautiful.
All right, well, we're probably done arguing for today. When's the next meeting? And I guess we don't have
well, we'll do the Friday
Felix.
one. And...
Do we have a Wednesday one?
Good question.
Felix isn't here to say.
Well, is it in the...
But we had a bit of a scope issue in that meeting, right? Well, I guess the meeting was about trying to define scope, but I had the impression that there were a lot of different directions that could go in.
That's absolutely true.
And Felix added a calendar appointment, but I don't think it handles everything that we need. So I might still be doing it, and it doesn't do an at channel and stuff. So
there was no repeat on that Wednesday thing yet. If I'm looking at the 10th, it was.
It may not have been rescheduled.
It was it was not set as repeating.
Well, I'll go ahead and put in the next one or two, and then Felix can put in his if he wants to.
Just check with Felix on chat. Just because he couldn't be here doesn't mean he's not reachable on chat.
Yeah.
Another topic that we, Timothy and I shortly hinted at in Hangouts was that it might also make sense to have a more lightweight discussion at some point, just about monetization of business ideas again, which I know that James would be interested in participating in as well, just to break the heavy brain intensive modeling things for a bit, like one meeting maybe on let's brainstorm on some business ideas, or well, whatever, it can be anything, right?
And what each of us are trying, if we're trying it, how did it work out?
Yeah, exactly.
Good.
All right. Great. Welcome.
Thank you all.
It's fun as always.
See you.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.
See you guys. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.